So, as an icebreaker, instead of asking you like what kind of animal you want to be or something like that, I'm just going to tweet all of you. Can you squeeze together? All right, cool. So, I actually have to sign it. So yeah, hi, I'm Rafi Jacoby. I'm a technology director with Razorfish, and I'm focused on social technologies. You can tweet me, I'm at rjacoby, and the hashtag for this session is SMW Social Tech. So a little bit about me. I'm a recent transplant from Silicon Valley. I've been working on social media platforms since the release of the Facebook API, when I helped Change.org with their first Facebook app. I was director of engineering at Context Optional, which is now Adobe Social, and built some of the largest custom branded apps on Facebook, as well as the core of their current platform that's become Adobe Social. At Razorfish, I lead a team that advises on social strategy and tech approaches, builds custom apps, and help our brands with apps on various integrators, as well as consult with the offices throughout the US and the world. So before we talk about the year ahead, let's talk about what social is right now. Do you need to know all this? If you follow Mashable, TechCrunch, GigaOM, you are flooded with information about tools, about platforms, about integrators, and you sort of end up with something like this. And this is, we're all on the infographic train now, and this is, in my mind, kind of an anti-infographic, because I feel more confused looking at this than I did beforehand. I mean, I've discovered things I have never heard of on here, and now I'm wondering, is that something I'm missing out on? Do I need to know about this? So there's a lot of overload out there. But realistically, you are probably focused on these, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, because that's where the users are. Many brands actually do use YouTube, but don't take advantage of the brand pages. They used to be very expensive. There used to be a big buy-in. You couldn't do much with them. Now you can iframe content into them. So those major barriers to adoption are largely gone. So what's trending right now? Well, obviously Pinterest. Pinterest creates more referrals than Twitter. Everybody thinks of Twitter as a major referral machine. You tweet this out, you get a ton of traffic, but you get more from Pinterest. Pinterest has more referrals than Google+, YouTube, and LinkedIn combined, right? So this is not a niche, this is major at this point. It's had some copyright issues. People just kind of post stuff that doesn't belong to them. They don't really think about the ownership of the content. They had an API, they took it down because they wanted to avoid what they called the Twitter problem, where they cannibalize third-party apps by adding to their infrastructure, by adding to their offering. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. None of this referral stuff comes anywhere close to just conventional search traffic, but it is making a pretty big dent in referred users. And the users who come through Pinterest have very high purchase intent, so they're really high value users that are coming into you. The growth sort of stalled for a little while. It was invite only, and now that it's opened up, I think it's ramping up a little bit. As with many of these, how they're monetizing and what they're going to do with partnership opportunities is still unclear. There aren't branded Twitter pages or Pinterest pages as of now. You can't really buy ads there. So what do? Do you have sponsored pinners? Do you have somebody who's the face of your brand who does that? There's already a little bit of that happening. We're finally getting around to painting our house. Moved in a year and a half ago, have a little one. Everything's up in the air. So Pinterest is a really good place to capture these ideas. My wife has just been, every once in a while she has a little bit of spare time, she'll find something and that's an inspiration and she can capture it. And that's great. But it's not very collaborative. We don't share ownership of this. I mean, we share ownership of the house, we're going to decide on the paint colors together, but really this is just kind of her scrapbook. I can't collaborate with her on this. I can comment on it, I could repin and have my own board where I'm basically duplicating the work, but we can't really be editing this piece of content together, which is, to me, a little counterintuitive. When you think about the way that we're taking conventional documents, into the world of Google Docs, of Microsoft Office in the cloud, where we can all be working on something as simple as a text document together, I don't have the capability to do that here. I'm curious to see where they take it. It's a good tool for this set of problems, but we're not really seeing the general level of utility that you get with Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, that sort of very wide penetration across the market. It's very gender segmented right now. It doesn't have that kind of obvious, like, oh, well, we could use this for communicating, we could use this in a business message. It's a little unclear where this goes, but they have a lot of smart people there, and it's really interesting to see where they're going to take it. Instagram recently purchased by Facebook, that just went through a couple weeks ago, finally, and we were all kind of wondering what Facebook would do with Instagram. Right around the time that they bought Instagram, they released their own camera app. It had filters very much like an Instagram. A bunch of you probably installed it. I don't know that you're using it that much, but they were clearly working on something in case this deal didn't close. Now, what's the play here? Are they trying to get the users? Well, there's 100 million of them. Are they going to roll them into Facebook as a whole? Well, Mark Zuckerberg just said that there's no agenda to move Instagram onto Facebook's infrastructure, and that they're going to be treated like an open graph partner, basically like a large third party with preferred access to things. So you almost wonder if it was kind of to keep them away from Twitter, to keep them away from Google, something like that. They have a really nice API. This is an API that shipped pretty much at the beginning with real-time update functionality, which, if you're an engineer like me, is very cool. If you talk to engineers and you ask them to build something that is going to subscribe, they will want to know, well, isn't it easier, can't they just tell me when the data changes? Because that's the only time I'm really interested in it, right? I don't want to build something that just goes, hey, have they posted a photo? Have they posted a photo? How about now? If you can just tell me a photo was posted, and I go, oh, I'm interested in that, I'm going to consume it now. It took Facebook a couple of years to get to this point where they had a subscription API that would say, oh, you were interested in this user's profile data, you were interested in this user's list of likes, that's been changed, you should come refetch it. Oh, okay. I mean, versus me, again, building this long polling solution, it's really kind of a pain. It's cross-platform, and it's done very well. On the first day of the Android release, there were 1 million downloads. There was a lot of pent-up demand for this functionality. The Android users saw what the iPhone users had, and they just jumped on it when it came out. Google+. So Google+ is a really interesting case right now. There's the Hangouts, which are really very cool. Technically, it's the best implementation that we've seen of a group video chat. If you've tried to do that with Skype, if you've tried to do it with FaceTime, with the AOL implementation that Apple used to have on iChat, it's okay, you can have a couple people. Here you can have almost a dozen people just all talking and interacting. So on a technical level, it's really cool. If you can get those sort of people together, that's awesome. You could use it, I've seen musicians use it to do things like reward fans and just say, hey, I'm going to invite you into the studio, so 10 lucky fans can just listen to me play tracks and watch me record or talk to me about the process of this album as it's being done. So if you have people that you work with that represent your brand like that, you could bring your users in and create those brand ambassadors that we all want. The Google Plus brand pages, when you create a brand page within the Google Plus network, shows up pretty high on their search queries. So when people just normally Google and do the Google search, your Google Plus page will show up in a pretty high level of prominence. So even if you're not going to do a ton with it, even if you're not making that your social focus, it's worthwhile investing a little bit of time in and curating a little bit and having a little bit of content on there every week or two. Simply because in Google's world, that's going to be one of the things that they show when people look for you. They just announced recently they have 400 million users and 100 million of them are active. What does this mean? I don't know a lot of people who are actually using Google+. YouTube if you use YouTube, you would see that for the comments, for the ability to even log in and vote, they converted you over from a YouTube account to a Google Plus account. So those numbers may contain people who are interacting with other Google properties, and what that level of interactivity as far as Google Plus itself, in the sharing, in the circles, in curating your circles, adding the people, you know, there may not be a ton of that. I have a Google Plus account. Basically, the people I see on it work for Google. So it's a little unclear where all that traffic's coming from. They have an API. They released an API very early. It's pretty small. It's read-only for most partners. There's a handful of select partners like Adobe Social, Buddy Media, Hootsuite that have preferred access. I think there's like 6 of them. And they can write to the API. They can create events that get shared into the circles. They just recently added a new API for their history, and that is open in a developer preview to everybody that lets you write these things that are called moments, essentially kind of like check-ins, kind of like iterations on points in time on a Facebook timeline. But they only let you write to that history. That doesn't actually go out to your circles. You actually have to go in to Google Plus and into the history, curate in the things that you are interested in, the things that you fed in through that API, through whatever application you were using that used that API. You then have to explicitly share them. So it's very early days. Maybe they'll change the functionality a little bit. We'll see. Vidi and SocialCam are these video sharing sites. They had explosive growth through the Facebook API. They were using the frictionless sharing stuff. So when it said that Rafi watched a video of a panda being tickled, Rafi watched a video of a cat being surprised, and you just saw all that stuff coming in my action. That was how a lot of the growth of these networks was happening. End users don't really differentiate them. If you talk to people, they've either not heard of these or they don't really know the difference and care between Vidi or SocialCam. Again, major copyright issues. People just kind of take stuff and post it, and then the owners of The Daily Show or Saturday Night Live start going after these networks, and you know, you're sort of back where you were in the early days of YouTube. It has that spammy reputation because all those social actions are getting propagated. And as we've seen, the social actions aren't quite working the way that Facebook intended. You probably all have experience with the Washington Post social reader or the Yahoo News reader. Those probably have been showing up from your friends with a fair amount of frequency, and you just sort of say, oh, that's an interesting article, you click it, and then it says, I want the permission to spam all of your friends before you can see this article, and you say, no, and you leave. So it had like a really good arc, and Facebook has recently said that they've really seen a precipitous drop in that, and they're rethinking the way that the frictionless sharing works, because I think a lot of people are sort of saying, well, I didn't mean to share that, and the idea that you have an app that's so compelling that you want to be sharing every sort of click and every activity, it works well for Spotify. It works well for Rdio. I don't know that it makes as much sense in some of these other places. So they're kind of backing off on that, and that may really affect the growth of these networks. SocialCam has an API in beta, Vidi does not. So how do you make all these networks work for you? Well, it's really all about content. All of these tools are heavily focused on sharing content. Sharing images, sharing videos, but most of all, stories. So you want your focus to be on creating compelling, shareable content, creating those stories that the user wants to propagate, things that people will comment on, people will like, people will reshare. And you want to do that easily. You want to not make it hard for your content to get out of your network and into your users' hands and into their friends' hands. So you want to leverage technology that will make that easy. This is not that. The easy way is not the best way. So there are widgets out there, and there are widgets you can use that simplify sharing. This is bad. This is from a real site, and there are networks that I don't care about in places that I don't do business, in languages that I don't speak. So it's visually overwhelming, it totally fragments my message, and I'm just looking at this, like, I don't really know what sharing a page on Amazon means. I haven't heard of most of these. Bebo is largely dead, but it's still in the widget. And I haven't even gotten to Facebook or Twitter or anything that, I mean, LinkedIn, I mean, we're still in the B's. So there's just too much here. There's no value to this. So one of these widgets, yeah, you could just drop it on your site, but it's not gonna help you. So there's these official buttons. They're really easy to implement. It's a couple lines of code, you just drop them in, copy, paste, and you're good. The user authenticates directly to that service. So my conversation about my password, about my credentials, is with Twitter, it's with Facebook, it's with Pinterest. It's not in your hands. You don't have to own that part of it. What it's doing is it's basically just looking to see, does this browser have a cookie that authenticates to that site? And because these buttons are all loaded as iframes from those sites, it can check those cookies and it can know, and that whole interaction is happening outside the scope of my site. All I'm doing is telling it what the URL of my information is that I want to propagate. So it's really easy. The end user experience, and most users tend to have their browsers already logged into Facebook, logged into Twitter, logged into Pinterest if they're using it. They don't even have to get an authentication dialog. They basically just click that button and it says following. Awesome, you know, super lightweight. The like button. So this is like the big kahuna, the granddaddy. And most people do it wrong. The like button is not like the other ones. You can't just drop it in. If you drop it in, what will happen is Facebook will say, okay, someone liked this URL. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna scrape that page. And I'm gonna look for these tags that Facebook has specified that tell us what the title of the page is, what the page is about, what the image that should be used in the like node for that page is. If you don't have that, Facebook's code will make what it deems to be intelligent guesses about your content. If you have an image on your page that's called facebook.ping, facebook.jpg, it will try to use that. If you have an image that's approximately the right size, it will use that. So if you're an airline and you have a massive banner image, and then in the bottom right corner you have a picture of a kid licking a lollipop at Disneyland, that kid licking the lollipop at Disneyland may actually be the icon for your .com as far as the social networks are concerned. So you kind of have to set these things, otherwise it's just kind of pulling stuff. And you can see there's a debugger that you can get to on Facebook where you just drop in the URL for anything on the net and it'll tell you what's wrong with it. Oh, I don't know what the URL really is for this. I don't know what the title is. You didn't give me a description. I'm just choosing an image. Here's the image I chose, you know? So in order to really own that piece of the social graph, you need to be curating your content. So let's talk about some of the functional and technical opportunities that working with these networks opens up. Single sign-on. I'm an engineer. Single sign-on is a big hobby horse for me. I like things that have good usability. I don't really want to enter things into your 12-field registration form. Honestly, like at some point, my level of caring just, you know, as soon as it gets to like, you know, zip code part 9 and it starts asking me, you know, all these other demographic questions and am I open to these things, I'm like, you know what? However, if I use one of these networks, I can do single sign-on and I can go right into your application. Facebook is nearly 1/6, that's 1 out of 6 people on Earth. That is the largest authentication pool in history. I'm not gonna say that it's better than a driver's license, it's better than a social security card, it's better than a credit card, but it's a lot better than just making people create a new email and password every time they connect to you. They know their social network credentials, they use them every day. If you make them make another password, they're gonna make a bad one. And then your site is gonna get hacked, right? Because it's like, oh, my password is MacBook. Like, you know, they just see the first thing that they see and that becomes the password. And the more passwords you make people create, the worse they are. So if you can use the credentialing through these systems, again, all of the authentication is done by Facebook, it's done by Twitter, it's done by Google+, and they just say, you trust me to be an authentication provider, I will tell you that this is who they are, and I will give you their unique ID on my network, and you just tie all of their interactions to what I told you. So you can use those plugins, and you can use, there's a registration plugin that Facebook has if you want to have those additional forms. You know, if you want people to register with their Facebook credentials, and you can suck in their first name and their last name and their email and their date of birth, and then you can have another additional pull-down field that says what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, or whatever else you wanted to add to it. And that can actually be submitted to you as JSON data that you can use within your own registration flow. You don't have to use them for authentication. You can use Facebook to pre-fill one of those bulky, complex registration forms that I hate. OAuth 2.0 is a standard for authentication that came out of these social networks. They all got together and said, we need a way to talk about who a user is and to be able to grant credentials that we can revoke, that have a fixed lifetime, and that let us really know who they are but control their access. So they all came together. It's used by Facebook, it's used by Twitter, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, LinkedIn. And it's extensible, and you can use it for single sign-on in a lot of places. Now, LinkedIn is kind of, you know, the elephant in the room. Everybody knows that over the summer, a whole bunch of LinkedIn credentials were stolen through sort of backdoor. It's turning out generally that this was not really through OAuth. It was through LinkedIn's communication with their own mobile app. But the real problem is how they store the passwords. They didn't add a little bit of entropy called a salt into the password. So if you and I have the same password, if our password is MacBook, if you were to, they can run brute force and basically see that my password is MacBook, and then because every password that is MacBook is stored the same way, they just go, oh, Rafi's password is MacBook, Amy's password is MacBook, Nick's password is MacBook. They don't need to know anything about that specific account, they can just reverse it. So there was some sort of CS 101 sloppiness that happened that exacerbated the whole problem. HTML5 and the death of the non-compliant browser. So within the last, I think, 2 weeks, Google announced that Google apps like Gmail, Calendar will stop supporting IE8. They want to use HTML5, they want to use CSS3, and they want you to upgrade so that they can support a good experience moving forward. The general consensus in the social community is that Facebook doesn't really support IE8. If you talk to any engineer and you say, well, we have to support IE7, you know, things will behave funky in Facebook, and it'll add a lot of time to your build. So there's a cost benefit that has to happen there, and you also have to think about who's the user that is still using IE7. Are they your target user? I mean, they might be the CEO at the company you're working with, but that guy, he actually doesn't have a Facebook account sometimes. You know, he's using his kid's one to see what the app is that he paid for. So HTML5, as we move forward, these networks are really pushing to kill some of the old browsers so that we can get the benefits of HTML5. We can get geolocation. We can get client-side storage, so we can push more of our application into the user's browser. An offline application cache, so that they could do some of that interaction when they're not connected to the network. Multi-thread like behavior for JavaScript with this concept called web workers, so you can have an application that's actually doing a couple things in the browser at once and not just kind of waiting and doing everything sequentially. And you can have those form fields that I hate. They can have better types of validation. You can say that this is a number field, that this is a date field, etc. Twitter Cards is something that they released fairly recently. It's only in a preview for a very select set of partners. You have to apply to get into the program, but it's very much like the Facebook like button. In fact, if you don't put Twitter's own tags into the header of your page, Twitter will use the Facebook Open Graph tags to figure out what's the longer description for this page, to figure out, should I use a bigger image for this page? Can I play a video? So here we have, like, this is an article from the New York Times, and there's much more content in there. And there's a photo associated with it. And then this is from Instagram and they're loading in the photos. So the way that they do for like pics.twitter.com, your site can also have that image blown up within the Twitter interface. Same thing for videos. I didn't have space on the slide. What's cool about that is that instead of just tweeting something, and really, I mean, you're limited to what, like 50 characters, because you have to have the URL, you have to have the hashtag, you have to have a lot of stuff that just kind of chews up those 140 characters that you want to use. So you're not getting very much across. And here, they're just taking that URL and they're going to decompose stuff off the page and say, well, here's what it is. Now, this will work on twitter.com. This will work on the official Twitter clients. And as we're going to now get to, that's where they're pushing everybody. So we're all used to pretty strict policies on Facebook and enforcement windows that can be very tight. I had a very large branded app on Facebook that we had been promoting with them that was in their case studies. And on the day before Thanksgiving, I received email that said we had a 48-hour takedown notice because the verbiage in our share items was not in compliance. And this was the day before Thanksgiving. So that sort of stuff has happened, will continue to happen, and these networks are very focused on the user's experience, not on the brand's value coming out of it. So if they feel that you're doing something that is contrary to their ideal about how they want this network to work, they're going to come down on you pretty hard, and it can be pretty quick and it can feel a little arbitrary. So you kind of want to play along with the rules. Like this, the new rules, the Twitter API, the 1.1. So this was announced about a month and a half ago. It's effective next March. Every API request to Twitter must go through OAuth. And we were talking about OAuth before. So you actually have to authenticate every time you want to make a request. It used to be you could do things like do a search, get a list of tweets, get some content, get some history, without identifying who you were. You really just needed to throw some parameters into a URL string, pull it down, or you would post a get to them, and it would just pull it all down for you, and that was great. You didn't have to say who you were, and you wouldn't get rate limited. Well, now that they're making everybody authenticate, they're also putting lower rate limits on some of the calls, largely on the posting calls, on the manipulating my account sort of calls, not so much on the searches, but there's still going to be some on that. And then there's the thing that really caused the big uproar, which is that applications with over 100,000 user tokens, credentials, essentially working users within the Twitter space, have to work with Twitter to guide them towards areas of value for their users and their businesses. Older apps were going to be grandfathered in, but you can't get past 200,000. So if you have 1 million users right now, once you get to 2 million users, you cannot have any more users, and you need to talk to Twitter about, is there really value in your application? This applies to the apps that replicate the core Twitter experience, the TweetDecks of the world, those sort of things, where you're basically making a Twitter client. And Twitter had said a while back, we don't want you replicating our core experience. We make the tools for that. And referring back to what I was saying earlier about Pinterest not wanting to cannibalize their third parties, this is kind of what they're talking about. That Twitter's pretty much had one developer conference, and then after that, it's kind of gone backwards, where a lot of the things that third parties were doing, image sharing, totally different mobile experiences, all those things are being shut down by Twitter policy, and this is what that is aimed at. Non-official Twitter clients are going to go away, or they're going to be non-functional, or they're going to be very limited. They want to control the experience. They want to control the content. And that lets them do things like roll out the whole thing with the Twitter cards. Whereas if you were a third party, or if you're just implementing it from scratch on your site and just saying, oh, pull in the tweets and let me display them however I want, you're not, are you going to go in and you're going to implement that every time? You're going to add the video player when they add the video player? So you get that, by people being in the Twitter experience. And then that leads into this, which is the other big thing that came out of it, the display requirements. A lot of people take tweets and just kind of, put them onto their own site. right? So you'll take the stream of your CEO and your CMO and some of your influencers, and you will basically just kind of have that come in, and you'll just put it on your site. And in most cases, you know, you're not really necessarily going to get shut down. They're not going to be chasing people down. There's no like major enforcement police yet. There might be. We saw it on Facebook, and you know, if they have the bandwidth, then maybe they'll start going after people. Essentially, especially because you're going to have those authentication credentials, so they're going to know who's pulling what, right? And they're going to know how often that's happening, and then they can just follow that link and say, oh, yeah, that doesn't look like this. That doesn't have all the things it's supposed to have. So all these things have to exist on every tweet. You don't get to take them out. You don't get to like replace them. You don't get to restyle the follow button. You know, if you say, well, I don't really want to link back to the person who tweeted it, you don't have that choice. I've seen a lot of people leave these out. The actions, the reply, the retweet, the favorite. I don't know why you would leave those out. I mean, you're basically killing your social amplification by removing the functions that do that. And I mean, at that point, it might as well just be something coming out of your CMS, just some sort of time thing that says, oh, you know, here's a short little block, you know, and it just becomes a little bit of a microblog. So you can change things like the font, the color, the layout, you know, height, width, etc. But yes, this does apply to you. It really does. People keep asking me, well, you know, there's competitors and they're not doing it. Well, they're not in compliance, and they won't be in compliance in March. So if you want to maintain a good relationship with Twitter and you want to look as if you're on top of this and really, you know, towing the line and know what the latest is coming from them, you want to be working within this. You know, and do you really want to run the risk of getting yanked? You know, say they shut it down on, you know, the day before Thanksgiving, like was happening to me, and all of your developers and all of your project managers are gone, and your site now has this giant hole in the top header where all your tweets are now not happening. Is it worth, you know, is it worth doing that to just so you can leave out one of the icons? But they're giving us this, these embedded timelines. So again, this is just a little bit of code. You set it up in your Twitter account. There's if you go into the preferences, there's a little widget section. You can create these widgets, and it's 2 lines of code that you drop into your page. Again, another iframe. Your widgets can go on domains that you control. People can't just take your content and syndicate it wherever you want. The owner of the widget is the owner of the tweet handle, right? Now, I can do things like a hashtag search, and I could put that anywhere. But you have these other things like my own tweets, my favorites, lists I've created, and just general searches, and you can put all that in there. And you can set, there's 2 themes, you can have it any color you want as long as it's white or black. And then you can set the link color, which is, you know, okay, maybe that gets you a little closer to your color scheme, and you can set the height and the width. Again, when you're building something like this and you're dropping this onto your site, think about bad actors. I get a lot of conversations with people about, yeah, we want to take these tweets, we want to put them on TV, we want to put them on our homepage, we want to take this hashtag, we want to own this hashtag. And you know, I'll say, well, first of all, that hashtag is like a regular English noun. It's already in use, and people, you know, you're not going to be able to take that over like, you know, just a basic word. But even then, a hashtag can be poisoned really easily. So if you want to use the hashtag, you know, my awesome product, and that starts trending, awesome, that's great, a lot of people are seeing it. Well, when it starts trending, what happens? People just start tweeting, oh, my little porn site, hashtag my awesome product, right? And it's like, and so what shows up? Well, that's not on message. You don't control that. Twitter's kind of chaotic that way. So if you're going to be doing something like that and embedding it on your own site, I would steer you towards something like favorites, where you can be curating tweets that have been tweeted at you, tweets that you like just generally, tweets of your own, and just marking those as favorites, and those will automatically show up in one of these widgets. This is actually my tweet stream widget, so again, I'm in control of this, right? So these are the tweets coming out of my account and tweets that I've retweeted. So the chance of pollution is really only me being dumb and clicking the wrong thing, which has happened, but I try to avoid. So let's talk about the future, to make some predictions. Some trends that I think will continue. Consolidation and acquisition in the social tool space. It may have run its course. Adobe bought Context Optional and Efficient Frontier. Salesforce bought Buddy Media. Oracle bought both Vitrue and Involver. Most of the major players are gone. The remaining players may need to carve out niches in order to be more effective because they're going up against the likes of Adobe, Oracle, and Salesforce. And those are big companies with big pockets, and they can afford to make mistakes and to throw a lot of money at selling things. Another thing that could spring up is you could have more boutique services. Not every little mom and pop operation is going to be able to afford the licensing fees that someone like an Adobe or an Oracle or a Salesforce is going to charge. So there's a niche for maybe not full-fledged end-to-end, does everything, does publishing, does apps, does analytics. There's maybe a niche for the mom and pop shops to get a lighter version of this product, and people can build around that. Or even some sort of boutique approaches on this that we haven't even thought of yet. There's been a renewed emphasis on speed. We were all very focused on really cool JavaScript frameworks, and we can pull things down and we can just start the page and then go out and get all the data and throw it all together at the last minute. Twitter now actually outputs more HTML. They've moved away from that. For them, the time to first tweet, the time when you load twitter.com and you see that very first tweet pop up and actually start reading it because there's not much else that's interesting on your Twitter page, the time to that is really important to them. So they wanted to make sure that that came down in the initial payload as opposed to before when they were just sending down a JavaScript toolkit which would say, hey, get the list of my tweets and then display them, right? So they've been focusing on that. Facebook reversed course. Facebook was very big on how HTML5 was the way to go for mobile. If you've been to F8, you would see that pretty much every year at F8, there was a session where they talked about how they were making these apps in HTML5, how you could essentially see your newsfeed and your friend list and all that sort of stuff that was all in HTML5. It let them deploy to a whole bunch of different devices. And the only part that was on the device really was a shell that gave them access to your location, that gave them access to the web browser component, a couple other things, your address book. But most of the rest of it was in HTML5. And I mean, we all know that everybody hated the speed and the functionality of at least the iOS Facebook client. And they rewrote it, it's native, it's like 4 times faster, it's really snappy, and it just feels a lot better. So they've reversed course on that. And they're not afraid, either of them, to really sort of admit, well, we made a mistake, we opened up the API too much, we're gonna take those things in. We bet too much on HTML5, we're gonna bet again on native code. But they do continue to try to drive mobile progress. Brett Taylor, the former CTO of Facebook, who was the founder of FriendFeed, said that if Facebook had been invented now, it would have been mobile. And they really put a lot of time and effort into that. They've got a standard called Ringmark. You can go to rng.io, and you can see how well your mobile browser behaves as far as HTML5 standards. And you'll see that they don't do so hot right now. There's a lot of things they can't do, like certain devices you won't get local storage. Other devices you won't get access to the camera. This is all the sort of stuff we depend on Flash for in a lot of cases. Like anytime you've used an app and it wants to take a picture of you, it says, you get a little pop-up that says Adobe Flash Player wants to get access to your camera. Flash is pretty much dead, and it never really flew on the mobile. So we need to move this standard forward so that we can do things and have those camera-enabled apps on the mobile, have the location-enabled apps, have apps that are capable of having some offline storage so that you go through a tunnel and it doesn't totally fail. Twitter and Facebook are now both first-class services in iOS. You can just hit the share button and you can share to either of those networks. Google Plus is very tightly integrated into Android, although what you're seeing now is you're seeing a lot of the carriers duplicating functionality that is in Google Plus, so there'll be custom music players, there will be custom functionality that they're really sharing functionality that replicates a lot of the stuff. And I mean, eMarketer is telling us that 26% of the US consumers use social on mobile. That's everybody in the US. 26% of us are using mobile social. And of that 26%, Facebook is 85%. So, this is a large proportion of people. So other things. There's been a lot of talk recently about false users and false followers in the political campaigns, on brands. Facebook is now saying, excuse me, that 8.7% of their users are likely fake or miscategorized or something like that. And Gartner is saying that 10 to 15% of fans' likes, reviews will be faked by 2014. So there's money to be made in this and sort of inflating the numbers. The creators are going to get better at faking them. Email spam. I mean, we're just doing spam wars all over again, right? We all got better at trapping spam. We all got better at having anti-spam installed everywhere, and the spammers got better at defeating it. So it's just an arms race, and it'll go on for a while until the point where it's not profitable. There's been a lot of work on ad targeting and retargeting, purchasing tools. The Facebook retargeting just came out for everybody recently, and people are seeing really, really good throughput on that. Now the question there is that indicating that maybe initially the approaches weren't super solid? But it's pretty good now, and the case studies are looking really good. So some API predictions. I'm hoping that the Google Plus API will expand, because if it doesn't, you're not going to get a lot of that third-party, really interesting content coming in. Tumblr has had postings for API developers in the past. Pinterest also. We think at some point Instagram and Facebook will probably come together, so then there's going to be some combination of those APIs. And I really think that there will be widespread adoption of Twitter cards. I mean, this is one of those free money things. Like, if you're not doing this, then all those URLs that you're having your social people tweet out just don't have that visual impact when somebody uses Twitter. You know, I can't see a reason not to do this unless your infrastructure is, kind of so behind that you can't easily edit the header tags on your site. And if you can't do that, you probably have another problem. Facebook search usage is going to grow. Everybody's pretty excited about this. In the recent Facebook financial filings, they were talking about how search is really going to become a big part of the business. So I kind of feel like there's going to be a Facebook SEO field that appears. There was a lot of money to be made in that, and people knowing that will be able to really cash in for a while. This is what people build social networks and tools with, and this is what your future will be built with. If you're not using these, you will be soon. And if you don't catch up, you may get left behind, because this is where engineers are going. For Ruby on Rails, you have Twitter, Vitru, Context Optional, Evolver, Airbnb, and Groupon, heavy users. Facebook created their own PHP compiler, HipHop. Python is heavily in use at Yelp and Pinterest. Memcached is used everywhere. It is really the backbone of the social internet. They try to avoid going to disk as much as possible and store those results in memory and just pull that stuff out. So just massive memcache farms. And then there's other sort of targets where people are using Node.js for speed in some places. Postgres and MySQL is the back. All of the new stats stuff is being done in Hadoop. And then you've got things like Erlang and Scala and Clojure, which are all very high performance languages that tend to be used at places like Twitter when they need to really nail down a particular piece of functionality for speed. So here's some surprises we all expect will happen. At some time in the near future, Facebook will change their UI again, and everybody will freak out and demand that we go back to the old Facebook, which is the current Facebook, which is what they freaked out about last time when it was changed, and so on and so on. I think that the policies will keep changing, and there will be a lot of uncertainty about the space, but again, those numbers are so big. The number of people who use Facebook, the number of people who use Twitter, the number of people mobile, and the value of things like the Pinterest user, we're all going to keep playing in this space, even though we feel like the sand is shifting out from underneath us. There will be some sort of social network or tool that comes out of nowhere. Pinterest kind of came out of nowhere for most of us this year. Like, it just was not on our radar, and then boom, it's this huge thing, and it's referring all this really high value traffic. Sorry? I thought that was a question. We'll get to questions at the end. That's just random noise. And then there will be a next big thing from former Facebook, Twitter, etc. employees, and it will launch with sizable funding, and your mom won't know about it because she doesn't read TechCrunch or GigaOM or Mashable. And some of those will eventually turn into things. Quora, it's still kind of inside baseball, but I do use it. and I think there is some adoption, and they're getting good search results in Google and things like that. So they are getting some traffic. But I mean, how many people used airtime when it came out? Okay, I did. And it didn't really go anywhere, but it had some real big names behind it, and I haven't used it since. There was a big splash about that, but so then, because people demanded it, app.net, the open Twitter alternative, they took a very Kickstarter-like approach towards raising their money. It's an ad-free version of Twitter that promises to have stable APIs and not do what Twitter did to the third-party developers, not cannibalize the ecosystem. You get 256 characters instead of 140, so that's 2 to the 8th, which is a very engineer-friendly number, as opposed to 140, which is something a bit less than the limit of an SMS message. So there's that. Users pay $50 a year to be on this. Developers pay $100. I have an account because it's my job and I can expense it. There's nothing in my feed right now. It's pretty much empty, and unless something really happens, I don't really see this going anywhere, but it's kind of, it's in the culture. Like, this is the backlash against what's happening with the changes in the APIs, with the changes in the rules that say, we're gonna roll our data in tighter and we're gonna control it more. Because someone owns the IP, here's the new MySpace. I don't think there was really a demand for this. It looks a lot like Pinterest. And if you go to new.myspace.com, you can see it, there's a video. It's pretty cool. The interface is nice, it looks like Pinterest. When you enter your status, it's like giant 64-point letters that just come over the whole screen, and look, I'm typing in giant letters. It's kind of cool. Justin Timberlake's invested in it, so he's beta testing it, so you can hang out with him. And maybe it's a hint of like retro chic with the name. I don't know if the name really has the cachet that somebody thinks it does. They're not using the old user base, so it's not like your old MySpace account is just going to sort of rise from the dead like something in a Michael Jackson video. You're going to go in and you're going to have to re-register. And you can register with Twitter and Facebook, so they're doing that right, and they're letting you do that easy authentication and sign-on that I was talking about. But they're not even taking advantage of the fact that they had, a couple 100 million users. Like, those are gone. The only thing they're keeping is the name, which is kind of like bringing back the name Betamax or something like that. But really, this is all about technology in the service of story. So this is my info. This is all the stuff you can see about me in the Facebook Developer Console. You can just drop my ID in, and you can see all of the stuff about where I've lived, where I've worked, my URLs, my marital status, all that sort of stuff. But this is just the info about me. This is my story. So, where does that succeed? That has a lot of real value to me. Somebody put a lot of thought into taking my information and building an experience about my life. And I can take that away, and I can really enjoy that, and I can share that, and I can show that to people and say, this is me, this is about me, this is my life, these are the things that are important to me. It was made by a third party. It wasn't made by Facebook. I mean, the music is familiar. If you saw any of the introduction videos at F8, it's the same music. They had access to that sort of stuff. But they built it as if they're any third-party application. They didn't have any special access. They just used all the public APIs. It's this thing that's engaging. It's something I want to share. The interaction was super simple. I went in, it showed me what it was, I pressed a button, it said, I want the credentials to see this stuff, and there it was. It just built this thing for me. So it was smart about what permissions. It pushes all the work to the client. When you talk to your engineers, they'll say, I don't want to build that server side because then I have to build this giant farm and all this stuff. So all this stuff was actually happening in the client, in the person's web browser. But there are problems. It's implemented in Flash. Flash doesn't work on mobile. So this experience isn't mobile. And of the 900 million Facebook users, 500 million of them do use mobile. So I'm limited that way. You know, when Windows 8 comes out, if people use it in the Metro view, they're not going to have Flash either. So we're limited that way. Because it's in Flash, and it's this lightweight implementation that's being done on the client, it's only being done on the client at that time. So I can't share this. This thing that I created that is really awesome is stuck in my local browser. If I want to share this, if I want to embed this in my timeline, if I want to send it to people, I made a screen capture. I used Snaps Pro to get that, right? I couldn't get it out. It's just running in Flash in my machine. So I had to capture that myself. No, not many people can do that. And if I wanted to build it server-side, like I said, I'd have to build a huge render farm that would make these movie files, you know, in this big thing. And yeah, we would do it in the cloud, and we would spin these things up and down as necessary, but it's going to be expensive and it's a pain. But really, you know, I want you to walk out of here thinking about more than like buttons and thinking about, you know, that app is an experience that I want to build, that we want to build with you, that you would want to build with your partners. And, you know, leverage the social technology. Think about these sort of things at the core, because if you think about the APIs and you think about what you can build something like that, not just putting a like button next to your existing product. And, you know, work with a PMD. We're a PMD. There are a lot of others out there, but we're pretty good. But, you know, talk to us, talk to our social media team. There's a bunch here, and you know, you can build something really amazing. So we have time for a couple quick questions, and before we do, I just want to say thanks to Chris Bowler and to Gibson Patterson for putting this all together. So yeah.